Oops. So today we will continue to talk about the linear algebra part, which is like a prerequisite for the course, and it will be very helpful for you to understand the mathematical formalism. So I will talk about some of these. As I said, some of these are redundant because you already know it and it's kind of trivial, but it's still, for sake of completeness, I'll talk about it. And what I'll say today is eigenvalues and eigenvectors, and then see the basis transformation. So this is something you know, that if you have a linear operator defined in a linear vector space and it satisfy an equation like that, which means normally an operator takes a vector to another vector, but instead it just stretch or shrink that vector, the magnitude, nothing it does to the vector otherwise. So when an operator has such vectors, those vectors are called eigenvectors, and this value is called eigenvalue. Now it's generally all of them, this is, we are dealing with complex vector space, generally this is a complex number, this lambda is a complex number. And very simple examples are, you can just play with some trivial example, like take for example the Pauli matrix, one of the Pauli matrices in two-dimensional complex vector space. This is the matrix, and you know it has this eigenvector, so this is your A, and eigenvectors are one eigenvector is 1 1, which means A11 with eigenvalue 1 1, with eigenvalue 1, and then there is another 1 minus 1, which eigenvalue is 1 minus 1. Okay? So one interesting thing to note is that this is, you can think, look at it just as an example, that these two eigenvectors are linearly independent. So this is one of the properties, and we will see more on that, that how to build up on that property and use that in various contexts. So this is one example, and as usual I'll give a functional example also, that d dx of e to the power ikx. So this is my operator A, and this is some kate x, and is ik, this is some lambda e to the power ikx, which is the kate. Okay, acting on this, and this is giving you this. So e to the power ikx is a eigen function. So in this case you call it eigen function instead of calling an infinite dimensional vector. It's an eigen function of A with eigenvalue ik. Okay, now one more thing is that you will just definition, so you will use this terminology, that this set lambda n, let's say n eigenvalues of a linear operator A, all the eigenvalue, this set is referred to as spectrum of a problem. So you will often see, we will say that spectrum of an operator or spectrum of a Hamiltonian energy eigenvalues and all that, and so on. Like if we know that if A is the, these are the eigenvalues of an operator A, then if you have a power operator A to the power m, then the eigenvalues are also lambda 1 to the power m, lambda 2 to the power m, and so on, lambda n to the power m. So this result has a strong implication on a thing called function of matrices. So you will be required to deal with something called function of matrices, some function, but the entry, but the what is this called? The variable of the function is not a scalar; it's a matrix, and they have, they are very useful in many different contexts of quantum mechanics. Not only quantum mechanics, in very various contexts of physics, that you, if you are able to write any function as a power series, then from going to the diagonal form you can write down the function of the matrix very easily. One particular thing will be very useful in the quantum mechanics context, then I'll discuss it in that when it come to that, is e to the power minus th. So it is, you can think it as an exponential function whose argument is some number, some complex number, times a matrix. H is a matrix. So how do you write, how do you calculate such an object? So you'll see time evolution is given by this object, and that the possibility of calculating those things comes from this fact, that when you when you power take expanding this in a power series and knowing that if you take power of a matrix, then the eigenvalues are also the power. And also you know that if you can do that, then you can always go to any basis. Like this is true in diagonal basis, but you can do that in any basis. So that is just a property to know, which will come useful in various other contexts. Now I will just quickly run over some properties which I already talked about earlier, that is specific to the operators which are useful in quantum mechanics: Hermitian and unitary operators. Hermitian and unitary operators are very useful in the context of quantum mechanics, and they have some properties, props, as far as eigenvalue and eigenvector are concerned. So first thing is, for Hermitian, eigenvalues are real. Am I connected?
Yes.
Okay, good. I'm hearing from message in my mobiles. I thought if I am disconnected, somebody is messaging. So eigenvectors, again Hermitian, corresponding to are orthogonal. So these two are very useful property in the context of quantum mechanics. So similarly now, so this is for Hermitian. So similarly for unitary, there are another two properties. First, uh, sorry, unitary eigenvalues are unimodular, which means they are complex number with modulus 1, like +1, -1, or some other factor, but it has to be, amplitude has to be 1. And again the second property is common. The eigenvex, oops, why I'm getting a call. Oops, just a moment, let me see. Sorry, just give me a moment. Sorry, I'm back. Let me just share the screen again. Oh, what happened? Why did I drop out from the? Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay. So these are the, so again eigenvectors have the property that when they are corresponding to different eigenvalue, are orthogonal. So there is one more thing which will come in the in various contexts, but it's not super important right now. This is something called normal operator, so I will not talk about it right now. But here we have this Hermitian and unitary are basically extremely important throughout quantum mechanics. So I leave the list for your mathematical methods course. All other type of operators.
Sir, what
Yes.
happens for degenerate? Will they still be orthogonal?
No, you know that point, that what happens in case of degenerate, right? Because degenerates are super are all in all the operators which are corresponding to degenerate eigenvalues. They you can take a superposition and that's still an eigenvalue. So there are infinitely many eigenvectors which are corresponds to that degenerates, and they are certainly not mutually orthogonal.
Yeah.
But for your purpose, you can construct an orthogonal, and that is
Yeah.
one way to do that is just by Gram-Smith. Another way to find a commuting operator, that is something I discussed earlier, and I'll discuss it again later. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Now there are two more things which will come again and again in various contexts in quantum mechanics when you do the symmetry chapter and the dynamics and all translation chapter. One is similarity transformation. So this is a slightly different thing. So earlier we saw that is operator's job is to take a vector to another vector. But then there is another thing called which takes one operator to another operator. So this is basically the similarity transformation and unitary transformation all does both of them does both. So it's basically changing a basis of a particular vector. I'll give you example what do I mean. So are you familiar with by any chance similarity transformations at least? Like, do you know this thing that if S inverse is a transformation from A matrix to some other A prime matrix? Have you seen that in any other context, such as classical mechanics? Not even in classical mechanics. If you have some inertia matrix or something, use a rotation. How do you rotate that object? Moment of inertia matrix. How do you rotate that?
If you're talking about tensors, then we have not yet gone
No, you
through
don't
that.
need. Well, you need not know tensor for that. But yeah, it comes in very simple examples. Like when you write down the moment of inertia matrix, Ixx, Ixy, it's a tensor, of course. Okay. Okay, so let me just tell you what is first in terms of definition and then some examples. So the idea is following. So let's say you have a object, some physical object, electric field, some vector, something. Now that can be described into different coordinate system. Right? So the idea is to, and that is true for not only these many other, some frame. When you say this frame, that frame, all those things, and there should be a way to describe the dynamics or that object from one frame to another. Like there should be a prescription to go from one the form of that object from one frame to another frame. Okay? Now actually this has a very interesting context. Now I'm hiding those interesting contexts right now because that will divert the description. But you will see this is a philosophical statement and that can lead to very interesting consequence. The statement is the physical law should not depend on how you describe it. Physical law should not depend on how you describe, how you frame them. Okay, because your description is your description. Okay? For example, the way we set up the coordinates, the way we like describe a particular form, not only like Cartesian and spherical, that kind of coordinate. Our coordinate system could be even like that. Let's say someone does a coordinate system which is like that, non-local, some curvy coordinate system, or something which has a vortex somewhere, something. So the physical law should be invariant with respect to how you describe it, and that leads to some interesting kind of symmetries, some interesting kind of aspects of a physical theory. And one such thing is gauge theory, and the gauge theories, and you can actually describe many things in terms of a gauge theory, like starting from gravity to many other things. So we'll come to that later. Let's not go into that direction. But right now, let's look at the simple things, the linear objects, which means you should be able to describe a physical object in terms of any coordinate. And right now we are talking about mostly orthogonal Cartesian or even non-orthogonal but simple coordinates. Okay. So in quantum mechanics also you will see that there is something called one representation, or the momentum representation, or energy representation, or position representation. All these things we'll see. There is this thing called Heisenberg picture, Schrodinger picture. All these things are various way to look at the same thing, and there should be a translation between one language to another or one frame to another. There need not be always very simple this frame versus this frame, like some other angle frame. It need not be so simple like that, but idea is very same. So let me define similarity transformation in an abstract way, then I will go into the examples. So the idea is following. Definition of this. So let's A and S are two linear operators on the vector space V. Then this transformation SAS inverse is called a similarity transformation. Just a definition right now. I'm just tagging a label or a name to this object. Okay, it's not yet much, but we'll see there is some desirable property for this. Now you might say that there are many ways to get one matrix to from another. Like if I have an operator, I am using the word matrix because it's just easy to do, but right now I have not yet made that connection. That I'll also make. Like some operator on a vector space, there should be various way to get another operator. Like you act another operator like a b and then you get another a prime or something else, various ways. Then why this particular way is a inverse? We'll see that it has a very I mean several very desirable properties, and that is why we are defining it in this way. So the way to get one operator for another operator is defined in this form in terms of another operator called SAS inverse. So the one first desirable property is that, so when these two operators are connected by this, they are called similar a prime, and that's why this transformation is called similarity transformation. Why are they similar? Because they have some property. So let me give in terms of a theorem. So if I have the following eigenvalue equation for S for A, okay, then this object A prime must have the following eigenvalue equation. Sorry, there is a typo. A prime is very simple to show that if you just write A prime as A inverse, it's very trivial to show that. Now this means that their eigenvalues are going to be intact, but their eigenvectors are going to change. So if A has a eigenvector x, A prime will have A prime which is SA inverse will have a eigenvector Sx, but eigenvalues are intact. This is a very desirable thing because when you see in context of quantum mechanics, the way we frame the problem, we will say the eigenvalues are the measurable quantities, are the one you measure, and not only quantum mechanics, in various other contexts. So that means the eigenvalue should not change depending on how you describe it. So that is why this is an useful presentation of describing a transformation of matrices. So you will see that. So this is one desirable property, and there are some examples. Again, I will not prove it, but the proof is extremely trivial in this case. So take the operator, for example, the Pauli matrices. They are the basis thing in the 2D complex vector space. Sigma x, sigma y, sigma z. Okay. So they are operators on this vector space where the vectors are 2 by 1 complex vectors. They are operators on that acts on those vectors, and they are related to each other by a similarity transformation, which means sigma x is related by, let me call it some S1 sigma z S1 inverse, sigma y S2 sigma z S2 inverse, sigma z. I might be making some typo here and there so that you can check. And then the corresponding S you can find also the S which does that. So for example, S1 is 1 by root 2 1 1 1 minus 1. S2 is 1 by root 2 1 I1, and it's also easy to find them. Like if you write it down without knowing what is the S1 and S1 inverse, you write them as some generic ABCD matrix, you can solve some equation and find them. Okay. Similarly, S3 also has some form. Now you can check that if this is the case, then there must be a simple relation between the eigenvectors of sigma z and sigma x. And it is indeed the case. For example, sigma z, which we just did here, the sigma z example we just discussed here, is actually sigma z, not sigma z, this is sigma x. But let's take the sigma z, it's very easy to see. So sigma z is 1 0 0 minus 1, right? So its eigenvalues, eigenvectors are 1 0 and 0 1 with eigenvectors 1 and minus 1 respectively. So that means if sigma x is related to sigma z like that, so sigma x will have same eigenvalues 1 minus 1, but eigenvector should be. So check that if this is true. So that is just to gain confidence on this statement. Okay. So now we will go to another interesting property is called representation. So I will talk about matrix representation because that is particularly useful in this context. And this is a whole subject in mathematics called representation theory. It is very useful in a little advanced stage of this course when you do the symmetries, and you will see we can describe all the symmetry operation in terms of group theory. And the connection is very natural because in group theory, when you have some object or some relation or some property, you can always have a matrix representation, and that matrix representation is directly useful in some physical context, especially quantum mechanics. Okay. So what is the representation? So far all the things we have described, if you notice that all the definitions, we gave all the definition in terms of abstract vectors, some kate, some operator, something. Then of course examples we talked about, sometimes matrix, sometimes function, sometimes other things. So all kind of examples we gave. So the point is, so the matrix representation is the subject which guarantees that you can always map an abstract vector space property to a matrix. So, and that's very useful in context of physics, especially because in physics we deal with reality, therefore we cannot deal with just abstract concept. We have to have a very concrete representation of anything. Okay. Okay, fine. Okay, so the statement is following in a colloquial sense, not a strictly mathematical sense. So an n dimensional, n, the dimension again means the sense I defined it, an n dimensional V space with linear operator can be represented in a matrix form of appropriate type. Now notice there are two things here. Not necessarily the dimension of the vector space need not be directly corresponding to dimension of the matrix. For example, we have seen earlier this complex vector space has 4-dimensional vector space, but the matrices are 2-dimensional that represents them, and that can be even any arbitrary dimension. Okay, so these two are different kind of dimension. Okay. Now what do I mean by representation here? So the word representation in mathematics means there is a one-to-one correspondence between the vectors of V of this vector space and operators to these matrices or vectors. So every relation or every elements has a unique partner. So that is the meaning of representation. Now this helps us to brings this whole abstract ideas in a more concrete form. So let's go for a little more illustration that how to construct a representation. So constructing, and then go for examples. So this is actually, if you know all these properties, now I'm just giving it a structure. Okay. Now you can imagine that I have a n-dimensional linear vector space. So let's say the B. Okay. N-dimensional linear vector space V, and now and it has also a linear operator A. Okay. Now I want a representation which demonstrate that or mimic whatever the operator A does on B. Now the best way to do that is to understand how it acts on the basis vector, because you know any vector is a sum of a superposition of the basis vector, or a linear combination of basis vector. So this is my basis vector. Okay. That means any vector is this with some prefactor. Now with X we can associate a column vector. Okay. Whose components are this? Sorry, x1, x2, xn. So then we say the X constitutes a matrix representation of the vectors in linear vector space. So X is a of X. Now you can say, because there is also another factor here, because these numbers xi depends on the choice of the basis. So it's a for a chosen basis, B. Now this B can be something else, some B prime. Then your X representation will change. So the representation depends on the choice of basis. It's not unique. Now let's see how does the operator look like. So we want to see how an operator acts on EI, because if you know that, then you know how it acts on any X. Okay. So then this must be, so this acting on EI will take it to some other vector, some EI prime, some other arbitrary vector. And that must be a linear combination of EIs because they span the vector space. So it must be true, some EJ. Okay. Now this coefficient defines the matrix, or defines the, clearly tells you that this A has to be a matrix in this space, because there is a number associated, n square number associated with it. So we construct it in this form: A11, A12, A1n, and so on, where each of these entry is basically, you can work it out since it is an orthogonal space, is E1 A E1. This is hello. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay.
Now you're audible.
This is the problem of doing it from home. Okay, you can hear me clearly, right?
Yes.
Okay. So now, just a minute. We saw that each entries, then you can calculate that by calculating the sandwiching A between this E1 and E2, which is nothing but it's a possible thing to do because this, you know that these things are orthogonal. This EIN, I mean, you don't know it yet, but let's say if they are orthogonal, then it is very easy to calculate, and that's why you will see the orthogonal basis is always an useful basis. So these matrix elements are nothing but if you want to calculate some EJ that's very easy to calculate because now you do a ji, let's do some em, not ej, some ej, then it's very easy to extract that because now these two are non-zero only if m equal to j. So that is why you will find some ej that is nothing but aji. Okay, so this is very easily you can connect the matrix now. Now you can actually try this for yourself, that you can work out the rule of matrix multiplication from here as a derivation. Earlier you learned it as a rule, how do you multiply two matrices. So let's say you want to operate two operators on ei. So then try this and show that this has to be this. If b has the representation bij ej, some representation, then this must be true. So try to show that. So this is basically how you multiply two matrices. The one index is contracted, which means you sum over that index, and then you sum over the other index. Okay, and so on. There are various other things. So now you can also work out how A acts on an arbitrary operator because you know how it acts on the basis. So it should be nothing but, and then it is acting on it. So this is a scalar. So A ei. So then it must be I xi j a j I e j. Okay. Now this is nothing but so this is nothing but dot product of a vector with a scalar. So this is a x I e I, which is another vector. So similarly, you can work out all these rules. So I leave that for you to play around this because it's very easy. But I'll give you an interesting example. The common examples are very trivial, you know that. But I'll give a little unusual example which you may have learned already, but tell me if you have learned. So last time I talked about it, this B1, B2, B3. Did somebody try that? So last time I discussed this example. Where is that example? No, not here. Yeah, here it is. Did somebody try this example, that representing a function which is a polynomial of quadratic order, representing it in terms of a vector as a vector space with this as basis, and representing an operator which is a derivative in that vector space? Did anybody try that? Then what will happen? 2 weeks later, hello, can you hear me clearly? Hello? Hello?
Yeah,
Let
now
me
it's fine.
switch to the other network. Okay, did somebody try this example? Last time I talked about. Okay, it seems nobody is trying anything, but if you are not trying those examples, then what happens? Within 2 weeks, everything you will forget. So this whole effort will go to waste, and then you will continue to say I never learned linear algebra. So don't do that. Please try the examples I am suggesting you. So this is the example that if I have a fx so let me find a matrix representation. So fx is a vector then in this space and my basis is 1x x square. This is my basis. So how do I represent a linear operator? So notice that what is the element of each of this vector space. So if I say there is a vector e1, so a act on e1. So e1 here is basically 1. The basis is 1. Okay. So ddx. So I want to represent an operator ddx in this representation. So ddx is 1. So 0. So I call it a 0. Null vector. So a e2 is x 1. So I represent it as some e1. Okay. Similarly, a e3 2x. So it is 2e2. So this is how the operator acts on this basis. This is my basis. So clearly the matrix representation of A in this basis must be 0, 1, 0, 0, 0, 2, 0, 0, 0. Because then you can act this A, this form of A on this E1, E2 and E3 and get your desired outcome. So then I want to do some equation. Let's say ddx of 1 plus 5x plus 3x square. So b1 is 1, b2 is 5 and b3 is 3. And we know this is 0, this is 5 plus 6x. Okay. So now check that this is true. So write the A in matrix form 0, 1, 0, 0, 0, 2, 0, 0, 0. Act it on this basis which is 1, 5 and 3 and you get 5, 6 and 0. Right? This is what you want. So this is how you represent an operator, an arbitrary differential operator in a matrix form. Now you can do other things also. For example, let's say I have a b x d dx. Okay. So then the b, you can show that in this same form, same basis, the b is 0, 0, 0, 0, 1, 0, 0, 0, 2. Now you can check all these operations. So ab is ddx of x ddx. So since they are linear operator, they must satisfy this linear mapping. So then AB in matrix form is 0, 1, 0, 0, 0, 2, 0, 0, 2. This is 0, 1, 0, 0, 0, 4, 0, 0, 0. So you can check that it does the same job as this combined operator. Now there are operators where this doesn't work. For example, this fractional operator or some derivatives which are not linear form. But that is a more complex example, but simple things where this works. The linear operator space, then this works. Now notice one more thing. This whole thing is a convenient choice. The reason this vector is written in this form is because this is a choice we made. The E1 in this picture, the E1 is 1, 0, 0. The E2 is 0, 1, 0 and E3 is 0, 0, 1. So that because of that choice, the matrix look like this. Now, but I can choose some arbitrary thing, some arbitrary parallel things. I can choose is 1 by root 2 minus 1 by root 2, something, any vector and corresponding orthogonal one. So then this representation will not be so simple. Then it will be more complicated. And you can also show that this matrix A, if it has to do this job, you can alternatively write this A as some Aij Ei Ej. So if you define your A to be like that, then it also does this job, the same job. So in the same spirit, you can also define your A to be some linear combination of Aij Ei Ej. Since you now know the matrix, now know the this notation of outer product. So now you can construct your this exact same matrix by this same E1 EJ, and you can also do it for any arbitrary basis. So then the matrix looks more complicated in other bases, not so simple. But the point is you can do that, and there should be a way to go from one base to another. That is also given by this similarity transformation. Okay. So is this picture clear? Okay, good. So this is the idea of representation. Now you can go through these simple examples that if so the adjoint of a matrix and the Hermitian matrix and all those things. So this if A is a operator which is Hermitian, unitary, etc., then what kind of representation will they have? So that sort of thing you can just check for yourself. These are very simple things. So now there is one more thing, that calculation of eigenvalues and eigenvector. This is also something by now you must be kind of familiar with. So let me quickly go over it. Back to eigenvalues and eigenvector. So so that's now we are talking in terms of matrices, no longer in terms of operators. So any operator must have a eigenvector, or that eigenvector have certain structure. Everything we talked in terms of operator. Now let me talk in terms of eigen matrices. So the statement is n by n matrix will have at least one eigenvector, and that is not null. Not null, which means if my matrix has some form like this and A is some matrix like this, then something at least one x must satisfy this, which is not this, not a null vector. Okay. Now the next thing is to use the useful property to for the matrices, that how to find that eigenvalue. So the way you can think it, that we can cast this equation as a homogeneous equation, which means the right hand side is 0, which means you can write it as some bx equal to 0, where the b is a minus lambda I, which is very trivial statement. Okay. Now you can show that this equation will always have a non-trivial solution when determinant of b is 0. That you know from will have a non-trivial means non-null. All x are not 0. Now it's very easy to prove that if determinant b is 0. So the criteria is that the determinant of b must be, oh sorry, is non-zero. A non-trivial solution whenever determinant of b, is it 0? Okay, yeah, this guy has to be 0, correct, not non-zero. So if this is true, then it must have a non-trivial solution, that you know from the system of linear equation property. So then you have to find this object. Then it must satisfy this, which is a nth order polynomial equation. Okay. This is actually the fundamental theorem of algebra. Nth order polynomial equation, and it must have at least one root according to the theorem. That you can prove also from the polynomial side. Okay. So then its consequence, it must have at least, now you can think it in terms of the polynomial business. So it must have, so now a sub point of this is that because this polynomial must have at least n roots, and they may or may not be distinct. So that is why the degeneracy question comes. So that is related to, it must have at least first of all, it must have at least one root or one eigenvalue, and b, for each eigenval, there is one distinct eigenvector, so that you can show. And then the third thing is eigenvec corresponding to different eigenval are linearly independent. This is a theorem which you can prove very simply, and by the spirit of this set of lectures, I am not going to prove that. So there, this is a very interesting, I mean, simple and interesting consequence, that an n by n matrix, that n distinct eigenvalues, no degeneracy, will have n linearly independent eigenvectors, which can serve as a basis of that vector space, because they span that vector space that we already know. Okay? Because if they are n linearly independent, this is a very important property, and that is extremely will appear extremely frequently in various contexts of quantum mechanics. Okay. Now, the prescription to find that, as I told you, this thing is called a characteristic or secular equation, that you also perhaps have seen. So you know these kind of details, right? This is a secular equation that you have to solve this polynomial equation to find the eigenvalues and all that. Are you familiar with these things? Okay, then why did you tell me that you don't know eigenlinear algebra and I had to go through all these details? Okay. Okay, then I save a lot of effort. I mean, this is diagonalization, right? You solve that polynomial equation, you find the eigenvectors, eigenvalues, and then find the eigenvectors. That's it. Okay. So then this guy has some property. So these are called trace properties, and they are trace and determinant property. They are very useful. So properties. So trace, you know, trace of A is basically the sum of the diagonal elements, and that has the property. Trace is sum of eigenvalues, and determinant is product of eigenvalues. This property will very useful and will come in various contexts, and there are some obvious consequence of that. So for example, if the determinant vanishes, that means you can say from there definitely at least one eigenvalue vanished. So these kind of relations you should be able to quickly figure out, and that can help you in many different contexts. This is a simple way to check, for example, if you are expecting a zero eigenvalue or something. Now there is, so this is one, there is one important property here. Let me write it as a theorem. For a real matrix, which means the entries are real, each
Sir,
eigenvalue, yes.
this property that traces sum of eigenvalues will only be true if A is written in the basis of its eigenvalues.
No, that is the interesting thing. No, it is always true. So trace is basis invariant. This is also something you can try to show, that whether you do any similarity transformation will not disturb your trace, and that is obvious because because we know that some of the eigenvalues are not, because the way we define similarity transformation, the property is that eigenvalues are remain intact, are going to remain intact, right? So no, the trace and determinant are invariant, and that is the power of these things. They are basis invariant quantities, and that's why they are often connected with various physical objects. Okay. So the property is following: each eigenvalue is either real or complex, both are possible. But if a complex is an eigenvalue, its complex conjugate is also an eigenvalue. So try to prove this. For Hermitian, it's not a problem, because Hermitian itself is not a it will always have real eigenvalues, so this is not a problem. But non-Hermitian has this interesting property, and that comes useful in various contexts. Now you can again, as usual, play with some examples. So take this example for 1 2 1 1. Check that this is true, or some other, construct some matrix, some 3 by 3 or more complicated matrix. Okay. Now there are some other properties which are useful. That is, eigenvectors of a real matrix corresponding to eigenval lambda that is also real can be chosen real, because you know the eigenvectors are not, or have some arbitrariness associated with it. You can always multiply with some factor and it will become something else. So it, the correct word is can be chosen to be real. Okay. And similarly, you can also show if there are this, for a complex one, we said that if there is an eigenvalue lambda, the lambda star must be also an eigenvalue, and the corresponding vectors can also be constructed by x and x star. Very simple. So this is the second part of that theorem. And finally, the trivial statement, which not trivial, which you have, I'm saying it trivial because you are perhaps used to it by now, is that another theorem for Hermitian, which are the more common matrices in our. So their eigenvalues are real and can be chosen to be mutually orthogonal. Okay, now I will talk a bit about transformation of basis, and that is basically the last topic in this segment. Like I already talked about transformation, similarity transformation. I'll show you how to construct it. So we discussed that in the previous example of this polynomial thing, that we could have done it in this basis or some other arbitrary basis. So the matrix representation depends on the choice of basis. So how to find this matrix representation from one basis to another basis is something very common and very useful in various physical problems, not only quantum mechanics. So let's say I have a basis which is this, and another basis which is this. So any vector can be either expanded in B or B prime. It's arbitrary. But this is also true that any vector of this B prime can be expanded in terms of the basis of B and vice versa, because the other set forms a basis. So that means any vector should be expressible. So let me call it Sji. Okay. Some n dimensional where j is 1 to n. Okay. Now the opposite should be also true, which means Ej okay. Now that means I can define these two matrices which causes this transformation. So Sji and Tkj are basically matrix S ka Ji element, and it is, let me write it as capital, this one as small, Tkj. So you can rewrite that the way to go from one basis to other, I mean not one base to other, the Ei prime, if I rewrite it in terms of Ek prime, it should be in k equal to 1 to n, k equal to 1 to n, Tkj is Ji Ek prime. So that is nothing but the dot product between two matrices, or the inner product. Okay, and to satisfy the both sides are same, so Ts Ki must be delta Ki. So that means you can go from one base to another with this transformation T and S, which are mutually inverse. So T must be S inverse. So now we are building up towards why we like that form S inverse. Okay. So you can go from one base to another and vice versa by this inverse transformation. So now let's try to write down transformation of a, like how do the so everything is abstract so far. I didn't yet use a matrix form directly, but now we use that transformation of the matrix representation. Okay. So now I want to see if an A acts on this EI prime, it gives this EL prime. Okay, not J, I, not I, L. The L is summed over. So this is also sometimes I might omit this summation because there is this Einstein convention of summation, which means if I write as something AAI, ALI, EL, even if I don't put the summation, the repeated index is summed over. That means that it's a convention. It's to save writing so many summations. Sometimes I might use that. Okay. So now I want to find the transformation of A, this basis to other basis, which means notice that what we write, we wrote this thing. So let's use this thing, this EI prime. Okay. So now just do this two line of algebra and you will be able to show that TAS LI EL prime. Okay. So that means the A prime that acts on this E prime, sorry, the A that acts on the E, that is corresponding to the A that acts on this E prime is TAS. And we know that T is S inverse AS. Okay, we know this from here. So then you can show that you can go from one basis to another basis by a transformation that is of this form S inverse AS, which we earlier defined as a similarity transformation. And then you can also show the other thing, which means that you can express any vector. So the next thing is you can express any vector in terms of these EI vectors. So then if you want to do that in this other basis, which means EL basis, you can also do instead SEI, because we know that this, if these are eigenvectors, these SEIs are also the corresponding eigenvector. Now this, all these things becomes very easy when you do it in orthonormal basis. Okay. So now time is up today, so I will not go over in the details for that today. I'll talk about it tomorrow. Okay, there is a very little bit left. I'll tell how this works for, but you should be able to figure it out from here. You will see that for orthonormal basis, this S, in addition to that, it must satisfy that property that S dagger S is identity or delta H is the additional constant. And then finally I'll show that how to use this form, how to treat matrix diagonalization as a basis transformation problem. Okay. So next I'll do matrix diagonalization as a basis transformation problem. Okay, that is the only thing remaining. Then I think this part will be over. Then there are some small things which is like thinking about infinite dimensional vector spaces and all that. That I think I will not do it separately, but I'll do it on the fly. I might talk a little bit about it in the class, but now I think you are totally equipped. If you have followed this lecture and done the examples, you are totally equipped to follow all the pre-recorded lectures up to the whatever is posted, which means up to the supplementary lectures. Okay, that is all for today. That is all from my side. If you want to discuss something, we can talk about it.
Sir, can you scroll up a little bit?
Yes.
Up, more up. Where you'd written those, yeah.
I'll post these notes. Don't worry about it.
Okay. Yeah. I had a doubt, but okay, it's fine.
Yeah, you can tell me. Is it doubt is getting clear just by looking at it, or it's
Yeah,
something?
I just misread something.
Okay, okay. So let me save it as PDF. Save file. Yeah, I'll send it to you. Okay. Any comment from someone else?
I
Comment
have
or
a doubt
question?
from a previous, like not exactly previous, but
Okay.
yeah, some part. So we said that the act of measurement haunts the wave, like collapses the wave function, right?
Yes.
Not the mathematical part, just something about just interpretation. So what
Yes.
exactly happens? Like because my wave functions are part of some vector space, abstract vector
Yes.
space,
Yes.
and my act of measurement is something physical.
Yes. So the description
So
is following. So a
hmm,
so what is think in terms of vector space. So don't use the vector and wave function in together, because that will cause confusion. So because the function is for the word function is reserved for infinite dimensional vector spaces. Okay. So let's use the word probability amplitude. So how a state is represented based on the quantum mechanical experiments, what did we learn? That we must represent the state, the so-called quote unquote state, because there is the word state doesn't mean the same thing here. So the quote unquote state is represented as a superposition of many other states. Okay. And the superposition coefficient is the probability amplitude. And the physical picture is following in the collapse language, is that that state, or whatever the quote unquote state is, in all those states whichever it is written as a superposition of, is living in all those states at the same time. So in the context of Stern-Gerlach experiment, for example, we wrote that the some psi, so let me write it. So some psi is some superposition of plus z and minus z. So the statement it's in both of these states at the same time. So what the act of measurement does, the act of measurement collapses. By collapse I mean the object now is forced to live in one of these two. Okay. It is not both at the same time when you measure. So that is the picture. Okay. It is one
but
of
my
these
like
two. Yeah.
the measurement itself, like
Hmm.
the act of measurement, it's outside the realm, right?
Yeah, that is the
So I'm
point. The point
basically
is you cannot separate the act of measurement. The act of measurement is a disturbance which causes something. So measurement is, so earlier what did I think? So for example, when you are doing some experiment, let's say you are looking at a object. Okay,
hmm,
the process of looking at a object is, there is a source, let's say sun or tube light. Photon is coming on that object. Photon is reflected from that object and coming into your detector, which is your eye, right?
hmm,
Now this act is not supposed to disturb the object, because the
yes.
photons are light enough and all those things. But if this act change the state of the object, then what you see is not same as what it was, right?
Hmm,
So this is a similar idea here. So the act of measurement is not a disattached unentangled part. It is, sorry, I should not use the word entanglement because it means something else in quantum mechanics. So the
hmm,
act of measurement is something that changes the state of the, or whatever quote unquote state of the object. And the state now, to make sense of the experiment, that state is a superposition state, which means many things at the same time. And the act of measurement is collapsing into it one. So if you do a measurement which is weak enough, so there is the subject, whole subject of weak measurement, a measurement that is weak enough to not disturb or partial. So this is also getting very complicated. There is something called partial disturbance, which means it doesn't collapse all but few. But let's not get into that. But let's just say if it is weak enough to not disturb, such that the whatever it was, it is that, then it will continue to be in superposition. Then you learn nothing about the object, and that is protected by the uncertainty principle. That how weak is weak enough. So that is basically the whole picture. You cannot think of the observation or act of measurement as a separate object. It is causing a change, and that change is this collapse. Okay, that is the peculiarity, and
It's
that is the limitation, and that's you cannot go beyond that. That is also
Mhm.
the problem. I know it's
So
frustrating, but that is the limitation of nature. Yeah. So
like
what is
so
but do you
like
understand the statement even if you are not
yes, yes,
comfortable
yes,
with it?
yes, yes,
I
yes,
don't
yes, yes,
expect
I do.
anyone to be comfortable with it, but at least our job is to understand it. Then what can we do
Mm.
about it? That's what God gave us. If you like to think in that way. Yeah.
And also for the youngster pursuit experiment, there is
Yes.
this theory coming up like retrocausality. They are thinking on that.
Wait. What is retrocausality? I don't know this word.
Retrocausality is basically causal structures in reverse time, like symmetric time structure.
Okay.
Causality, time
Yeah.
symmetry.
So this thing I am not entering it right now because it is
Mhm.
reserved for quantum mechanics 2 on time reversal. And you said
Mhm.
time symmetry or time reversal?
Time reversal, yeah.
Yeah, time reversal is a peculiar, not a very peculiar thing, and I think you that requires some thinking because
Mhm.
in practice you cannot do a time reversal, right? Then why do you care so much about it? This is a very
But
interesting
mathematically it's
question.
possible. T is just a
Yes, I
variable or
know,
parameter we took, so
I know,
even it's
but
not possible.
that I'll come to a discussion, detailed discussion on this when I'll come to the dynamics part, that defining time and thinking in terms of this t minus t. But
Mhm.
okay, so tell me what is this retrocausality? I don't know about it. What is the idea?
It's basically that they are more about like instead of having a probability picture or Born interpretation for Young's
Huh?
experiment, they follow the Bohm's interpretation, pilot wave theory,
Oh, okay,
that
I
a
see.
particle is
Yeah.
guided by the wave, but
Okay.
at the time particle only goes from one slit, and when
Yeah.
we measure it, the act of measurement results in going the information backwards in time,
Okay. I don't
and
know
it
how to
tells the
connect this
particle.
picture. Yeah.
Yeah,
So
it's
it is
fine.
not very clear to me, and I read Boehm's information a bit ago, and it's kind of not in top of my head. So I have to read it and
Mhm.
remind myself. So I cannot directly comment on this statement. But the point
Okay.
is, there are many ways to interpret this. Okay. There
The
is no
only
doubt.
problem I got that
Yes.
that interpretation sounds more feasible than this.
Well, that
We
is what is that is the statement of Dyson. It's all about. It's
Mhm.
like a religion. Like which religion you choose to follow. All are stories, right? So now, which story
Mhm.
you like? There is all are unfalsifiable. All are good enough to some extent, and it
Mhm.
becomes weirdly complicated in other scenario. So yeah. So first of all, I don't remember this approach, and I probably
Mhm.
don't even know this term. I never came across, but this Bohm's pilot wave I know, but I forgot it now. So it
Mhm.
might sound appealing. So you can choose to take that language, but that will not alter the reality, which means the observations you are making. And the fact that it's a superposition, well, you are saying you can think it as not a superposition, but something else, right? Is that what
Mhm.
you are saying? I
Kind of like
don't
I'm
think
also not
that.
sure about the
Yeah,
whole picture.
okay. So then let's not go very deep into it unless you can read it up and tell me it later. We can have a
Okay.
session where you tell me about this, and
Mhm.
then we can learn about it. But I think you cannot avoid this picture. In all the different interpretation, the superposition is there. Now, to how do you make sense of that superposition? That is the problem. And in order to make sense of this superposition from a classical underpinning, have led to all this interpretation, which means all of them tried to believe that there is it's a belief system. Okay, it's like a religion, and it's a belief is that the underlying nature of the world is classical, and what you are saying is can be explained from that. And that's why people even landed on many world and all kind of people are willing to accept all kind of peculiarity, but not willing to accept the fact that the world is not classical in nature. That is the reason all these interpretations are there. Okay. So you
Mhm.
might find another interpretation also besides what is there if you follow this philosophy, but I prefer to be in the philosophy where, I mean, this is again personal choice. I have no reason to back it up. Is that what if I say that underlying nature of the world is itself like that, like quantum, which you cannot even have a underpinning. So
Mhm.
quantum means or whatever, like whatever the quantum world suggests. So that is also a possible approach. Some people take, like Dyson and Dirac, they take, Dirac was also in that school, Dirac and Dyson. They believe that you cannot come up with an interpretation which has a classical underpinning. All these interpretation have a classical underpinning. So it's again, as I said, it's a matter of choice at this level.
What exactly is classical underpinning? You mean that?
This word you were trying to say that there are many worlds and then they are in different so this makes sense if you think it classically, right? You So that is what I mean by classical underpinning. So you mean to say that quantum mechanics is an effective emergent theory of an underlying classical world which is hidden, which you don't know completely. That is why you, since you are looking at an incomplete theory, it looking weird, right? So that is the belief system which works in that, and that is why this has this hidden variable interpretation and all that.
So apart from interpretation part, is there another formalism for quantum
Of course,
mechanics,
there
like
are 9
mathematical,
formalism. I told you, right? There are 9 formalisms, and
as
we
like
are learning
mathematical
only 2.
structures?
Yes, path integral. But
Okay.
path integral will not be very satisfactory to people who are mathematically inclined, because Feynman broke all the rules of mathematics there, and yet it works. So it is still, and there are open questions that how to make it work in strictly mathematically. So that is also makes you to brings to this point: is mathematics a language or a theory, underlying theory? So anyway, the point is that there are 9 formalism, 9 ways to think about this problem, and some of them are easy and useful in one context, and some of them are not. That's why we need to learn those in various situation. And they, as I said in the lecture, there are like 9 different windows to look into the same room. It is like you get a different view, but it is still the same room, the physical reality. Okay, so um, we will learn matrix mechanics and wave mechanics throughout quantum mechanics 1 and 2. I wanted to put path integral, but I don't think we cannot do linear algebra, elementary linear algebra, and advanced formalism in the same course. It's impossible. It depends on the setup, the prerequisite setup. So path integral I wish to do, but couldn't do earlier. This year there is no way. So but you can read it up. It's not that difficult. It's easy. I can suggest you reference. So these 3 are pretty much common, very common. But then there are other like density matrix formalism and all other semi-classical Wigner-Weil-Moyal formalism. There are different ways to calculate these things, different pictures. So there are many other formalism, but these 2 are the most powerful formalism, which allows you to calculate things very accurately. So quantum mechanics is a theory that is tested 16 places after decimal in experiment. It's a very powerful, accurate, precise theory. Most precise triumph of human being. So that is, and most of these you can access, almost all of it you can do using this matrix and this bracket formalism based formal thing. That is why it is something that is normally taught in any course. Now, path integral is also useful way to think about it, and many things becomes clear when you think it in that way. And that is, as I said, that is based on that philosophy of extremization, which is the driving principle of all these Lagrangian Hamiltonian pictures in classical mechanics. So that is basically the landscape of theories, landscape of formalisms in quantum mechanics. Yeah.
Sir,
Yes.
so like in this example, psi C1 plus Z, the projector, like the plus Z projector, it will give us C1, right?
What you mean to do this one, right? P plus Z plus Z. Correct.
Ah.
So P
So-
plus acting on psi will give you C1 plus Z.
Yeah. So my question is, where in the mathematics is this collapse given? Because you have to choose the projector based on where you think it will collapse. Where is this random?
Yeah. So the act of measurement is a act of. So we think it in this way. A measurement is a projection.
Yes, but you have to choose. Like for here, if I want to see what is its probability in the plus Z or its probability amplitude, I have to choose a particular projector.
Yeah.
and
So
then-
if you are doing a plus Z or plus X, you mean that?
Yeah,
Do you
no, I
mean
mean
that
to
or
say,
something
where is
else?
this randomization in the mathematics?
What do you mean by randomization in math?
Like
So
if
when
I
you say we have to
phi in the
choose,
Z
did you
basis,
mean which, oh, so I think, what if I understand what you say, it is true that what are you measuring that decides that
I'm measuring in the plus z basis.
yeah, so plus z, then you have to use the z projector, right?
Yes, but the z projector makes us choose between plus z and minus z, right?
Yes, because that is because you are
So
measuring
there
z.
are two
If you do
things.
x, you
There is
do
this
x, right?
like uh it like
No, no, no. So see, the state doesn't contain all the information. So this is also another thing about quantum mechanics. It's the state and operator. So what is the state, that depends on what are you measuring. This is why Einstein said the moon isn't there until you look at it. Okay,
yes, no.
it is like that. So
But my question is that like forget about the math. If I measure the psi in the z basis, I should either get like c1 square or c2 square, something like that, right?
yes,
And measurement force, like if it is being done one by one, the measurement forces it to either go to plus z or minus z. So
right,
where is this? And that choice is random. So where
yes.
is this choice in the
Yeah,
math?
because we are interpreting this thing as a probability, right? The C1 and C2 is an amplitude, and C1 squared and C2 squared is a probability. So we are interpreting this as a random
But
event because
to get this probability c1, I need to
yes,
do a projector. Like if I want c1, I need to use the plus z projector.
yeah,
So I'm choosing a projector as if I already know that it's going to go to plus z with that probability.
no, normally that is not how you think of measurements, right? A measurement is a SGX device, right?
Like how do you represent this measurement? This measurement that will force it randomly into plus or minus z.
Yeah, so that
How
is
do you
what I will
represent
come
it?
to the next lecture, in some later lecture, but it's also there in the pre-recorded. The measurement is represented as a operator, okay, some operator, let's say Sx. Now Sx acting on psi
Hmm.
will give you two possible values, because the psi is a superposition of not two
Can
possible.
you write Sx explicitly in like some matrix form?
Yeah, yeah, so that is what we are doing today, right? We are saying what is the matrix representation of Sx, right?
But yeah, just can you just write it down?
Yes, so Sx acting on psi will give me some Sx C1 plus Z, some Sx.
Let's just use sz.
Okay,
So it's easier. Yeah. Okay.
okay. So now we just need to know how the Sz acts on plus Z and minus Z. That will give me this thing, right? That will give me the
Yeah.
form.
So how does it
So
act?
we know that it gives me h bar by 2,
Correct.
right?
So like if you write down the state, it will be
Yeah, yeah.
C1
So
HR by 2.
I will choose a representation. So let me I choose this representation. Plus Z is 1 0 0 1. I can choose any other representation. That is
Yeah.
what you will do in assignment 3. Play with the representation. Okay. So now you can work out, right? So now you sandwich it with plus Z and minus Z. Just the strategy I told you. So then you can work out the SZ must have this form
But like
in
after
this
the
basis.
measurement, after the sz measurement, it collapses to one either plus z or minus z, right? But
Yes.
sz acting on psi still gives us both components. Like,
No, it gives with a C1 and C2, right?
yes, but one of them doesn't become zero, but actually
So
after measurement, one of
SZ
them goes to zero.
acting on psi will give you
C1
plus h bar by 2 C1
correct.
plus Z minus h bar by 2
But
C2.
after measurement, this superposition doesn't actually exist.
No, no, but that is why you talk in terms of expectation value. So what you calculate actually is a expectation,
Okay.
okay, which is this guy. So something like h bar by 2 C1 square plus minus h bar by 2 C2 square, right? So that is gives you the average of many measurements. That is how you that is where the
But
probability
there
comes
is
in.
no. But the main idea of my question was that after measurement, the superposition doesn't exist. So sz after psi is like measurement on psi
No,
still
no.
gives us.
I think I understand what you're saying. So with you were expecting that the fact that after acting sz I should not remain in a superposed state, I should
Correct.
have a, so that is the point. So these doesn't, the probability makes sense only in a average, in language of average. It doesn't make sense for an individual event. Okay, so then the idea is following, that once you write down the superposition, then it gives a prescription of what you will get on many measurements, not an individual measurement. So
I was
expectation
expecting
value
there
is a
will be
prescription for that,
Mhm.
because it is like just like coin toss, right? It's
Yeah.
coin toss is you say 50% probability. It's not a statement about a single event.
Correct.
That is the nature of probability, right? Yeah. So that is how the prescription is.
So the
It's a
expectation
prescription
value.
to predict the
Mhm.
measurement of what happens in many measurement. It doesn't say anything about an individual. It is like you say you went to a it is like saying that somebody tells you there is 50% chance that
And then
if
you do only
you
once and you get
that yeah, so if you invest in this stock you will make profit, and then say you invest in stock and made loss, and so what happened to that? So it's not a statement of one, it's a
Yeah.
statement of if 100 people invest, 50 of them will gain. It's like that. So it's the nature of probability.
Yeah. Okay. I was expecting that there will be some
No. But that
randomness.
is yeah. So I understand the confusion, but that's the nature of probability. Okay, probability works like that, and that is also another upsetting fact about this whole quantum mechanics business. It tells the underlying nature of the world is not deterministic; it's probabilistic,
Hmm.
which means the underlying nature of the world is random or probabilistic. That's a very disturbing fact.
Is there any way to collapse it? Okay, yeah, there is plus z plus z. Then you have to use the projector. Okay, yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
The projector will just simply collapse it to either plus z or minus z.
Yeah, the job of the projector is just to project it one subspace, right?
Hmm. Yeah.
So, and we saw that in terms of Stern-Gerlach, what it means physically. It's a sequence of two modified machine where you cut the line in one.
Hmm.
Yeah. Advait is saying something. What does it mean? I don't know.
I don't know. A wave function represents an ensemble property. Yeah.
The same
Yeah,
thing they
that
were
is
saying
right.
that.
That is right. Yeah, it's an because it's a language of probability. But we are trying to understand where is this probability coming from. Because in a coin toss experiment or any other classical examples, the probability is coming from complexity. Your probability is a measurement of your degree of ignorance. Okay?
Right.
This is not the case here. It's inherent nature. It's not about that you don't know, because it's complicated. In principle you can know, but you don't know. But it's in principle like that. That is the difference, and that is what all these experiments are telling you.
Sir, can
No,
you once repeat what this expectation value represents? What is this measure? Like this value that we get? What is
so
it?
expectation value represents that if you do many measurements,
Hmm.
what is the average value, which
I
means
will.
the value is h bar
Whether
by
I will
2.
measure h bar by 2 or minus h bar by 2.
Yeah, so there are only two
happens.
possibilities. So if it is in plus z, right? So
Hmm.
if sz is measured in plus z, then the average is always plus h bar by 2, right?
So
No
it's like
doubt.
a weighted average of.
Yeah, but if it is a plus x, then the average is half time. If it is 50-50, C1, C2 is 50-50, then the average is 0.
Wouldn't it be a better formalism if we included that randomness somehow in the operator?
Well,
Like-
this is already there, right? So you want to say talk in terms of, so you are trying to beat the nature of probability now. Okay, so you are saying if your single operator can tell, but you cannot. That is how the probability works, right?
You need multiple.
But
Any
I guess
probability
in
works.
matrix formalism it's there, right?
No,
There the operator is evolving rather than the wave function. So maybe it might consider.
no, that evolution is different. What you are talking about is evolving means some time evolution you are talking about, right? Right now we are not
Mhm.
entering in that picture. Forget
But
time.
here
It's
also,
a
like,
static problem.
here also, look, the wave function itself is collapsing, right?
Yes.
In the showing the picture,
Yes.
not the operator. Operator is static.
Yeah, but
Whatever happens,
why
it
are you
happens to
bringing
the
in
wave
time?
function.
I have not yet talked about time.
No, I'm not talking about time. I'm talking about probability itself.
Then the Schrodinger picture, Heisenberg picture, all this comes in the context of time, right?
Only time.
Yeah. Without time, why do you need them? One
Yeah,
of them
but I
evolving. What will evolve? The operator will evolve or the state will evolve?
Collapse also is collapsing wave function is also evolution, right?
It's
in some
evolution,
sense.
but right now you can talk about it without the time.
Yeah, it's not a time element.
You don't need time yet. Right? You can think, well, everything is a matter of, there is a question of time inherent in every problem, but you can discuss it without that. Okay.
But what I was saying, like the wave function can be represented in form of two different this thing, plus z and minus z. So the
Yes.
inherent picture of probability is coming not in terms of operator but in terms of states.
Yes, that is
Here.
how this is written here. Yes.
But I guess in the Heisenberg formulation, it comes in the terms of operators,
How?
not in terms of states. I'm not sure. I'm just like from the
Yeah. So
picture I was
don't
seeing.
say. So I strongly suggest you, especially you,
Hmm.
to think a little more. Like, don't just know words. Okay, because it is the Heisenberg picture will come later. We'll discuss that. But the point is, you can well, one might be able to do that. So see, it is like saying, so let's say you are rotating an object. Okay, you are rotating that object. Okay, now you can either think it in terms of this, or you are saying you're rotating the frame. Okay, the frame, not the object. Okay, so let's say if you rotate the screen in front of you, okay, then the screen flips, or if you rotate yourself, the same thing will happen, right? So now you are saying, where do you want to put the matter of the superposition and probability? Do you want to put it on the state or put it on the operator? Right? It's a matter of choice. And this Heisenberg or Schrodinger picture are basically these two choices. It's very simple, nothing more than that. And this comes usually in the context of dynamics. Right? Now here, whatever you do, it doesn't alter the fact. It's possible to probably do another formalism where you transfer this thing into the operator. But the point is, you cannot beat the fact that probability is probability, which means there is no meaning of probability for a single event, right? So the experiment is predicting, the experiment cannot predict what will happen in one event. It will predict what will happen on average. That is what happens in any probability context. When you toss a coin, you don't have the power to predict what will happen. No formalism can predict that, right? That is the nature. Only thing you can predict what will happen after 100 toss. This is what it is doing. This is the nature. There is nothing more you can do. Make sense?
Okay, now I understood it. I think.
Yeah.
Right.
The difficulty you are having is coming from lack of understanding of probability. So go back to your probability and do toss 100 coins maybe. Then you understand. Actually, that is what I did, by the way. When I learned probability, I had this problem, and I tossed a coin 100, 200 times and made a plot and thought of all this.
Was it exactly 50-50?
Yeah, it was surprisingly 50-50, but that is not necessarily true always. I
Yeah.
did like 100, 200 times. So it should be like this. So if it may not be like that. So what I saw this like this. So it will be like this. So this is the 50%. Okay. So it will fluctuate, but the average will be 50-50.
Yeah.
So when in school I did those things. So this is very important. So when you read any new concept, so go through it, like go through it in your own hand, which means do the examples, construct some example, do something, then you know what it means actually. It's not to develop your problem solving skill, but sometimes it's not easy to understand what is it even means. Okay, so that's very important. And Advait, if you want to talk about this thing, so why don't you we should set up some office hour actually. So why don't you read the
Sure.
Ohm's interpretation and
Yes,
tell
yes,
me
yes, I
about it?
will.
I don't know. I totally forgot about it. I cannot tell you right now. So
Yes, sure.
that is one thing. And this Heisenberg picture, Schrodinger picture, this idea is this, as I told you, that if you rotate, whether you are rotating the frame or you are rotating the object. So it's like that. What are you translating? That is the picture. So it doesn't matter where you put the randomness. That is not a question of Heisenberg. You can think in terms of it's a new different, maybe it's your formalism. But the point is, the question is, where do you put this thing? Where do you put the randomness? Or
Yeah,
where
it's inherent. Like
the probability nature?
even though it talks about in terms of operator or in terms of state, it's there. Yes.
Yeah. So it will go somewhere, one place or the other, but it will not change what is probability. Okay,
We can avoid it, kind of.
you cannot avoid it, and that's the nature and definition of probability. And that also often common people don't understand this. That's why they pick up this weird notion. Sometimes these news articles, they exploit this fact. They survey 2% and say that something, make a conclusion, and they don't present the fact they actually surveyed only 2%, but they just want to bias you. Okay, so that
Yeah.
is the point. Is not only you need a ensemble, the ensemble has to be large. If it is not large, then it is meaningless. A small sample has wild fluctuation.
Yes.
Yeah.
Sure.
More question,
Thanks.
comments?
It's fine for now. I
Okay.
guess.
See you then.